The Grand Luminous was the jewel of the celestial line, a starliner where opulence sailed the void between worlds. In its glittering Aurelia ballroom, under a holographic dome mimicking the Eden Nebula, the galaxy's wealthy and powerful murmured. They were gathered for the final night of a grand cruise, their conversations a low hum of commerce and carefully curated gossip. Among them, moving with quiet efficiency, was a young woman in a simple black and white uniform. She was a server, her eyes downcast, refilling glasses of shimmering Vian nectar without, disturbing the shimmering silks and tailored suits of the guests. At the room's heart stood a magnificent piano, a relic of earth made of polished obsidian and ivory. It was owned by the liner's maestro, a man of considerable reputation who had, an hour prior, consumed a dish that violently disagreed with his constitution. The cruise director, a man with a permanently fixed smile, wrung his hands near the instrument, his voice a frantic whisper into his cum dot. The young server finished placing a glass on a tray and turned. Her gaze lingered on the piano, not with longing, but with a deep, familiar recognition. The cruise director's eyes swept the room, desperately alighting on a renowned composer from the Geldar cluster, who shook his head with a smirk. He asked a virtuoso from the Lyran Conservatory, who pleaded a strained tentacle. Panic began to crack the director's polished demeanor. The evening's centerpiece, a musical performance beneath the artificial stars, was crumbling. A soft, clear voice broke through his panic. "I can play." He turned. It was the server, her hands clasped neatly before her. He blinked, his smile turning strained. "Child, this is not the time for jokes. This is a Conrad sonata. It is complex." "I know the piece," she said, her voice still quiet, but now layered with a certainty that gave him pause. The Geldar composer chuckled, a sound like grinding pebbles. A socialite nearby whispered behind a fan, her words just audible. "How adorable. The help thinks it can entertain us." The director looked from the silent, expectant crowd to the server's steady eyes. Defeat slumped his shoulders. He had no other option. With a curt, desperate nod, he gestured her toward the instrument. "Just keep it simple. Play the opening measures cleanly. That is all we ask." A ripple of amused curiosity spread through the ballroom as the server approached the piano. She did not straighten her uniform or smooth her hair. She simply sat on the bench, her posture shifting from servile to sovereign in the space of a breath. For a moment, she was utterly still, her fingers hovering just above the keys. The crowd watched, a mixture of condescension and boredom on their faces. Then she began. The first notes were tentative, a correct but unremarkable tracing of the Conrad's famous opening theme. The Geldar composer gave a slight, confirming nod to his companion. As expected. But as the melody unfolded, something changed. The server closed her eyes. Her shoulders, which had been tight, relaxed. Her touch on the keys deepened. She was no longer playing the notes as written. She was rebuilding them. The Conrad Sonata, a technically brilliant but emotionally sterile piece of modern galactic composition, began to breathe. Under her fingers, the structured phrases softened and swelled. A haunting, ancient melancholy seeped into the brighter passages. The rhythm, once rigid, began to sway with a pulse that was organic, inevitable, like a heartbeat or a tide. The amused whispers died. A financier from Sirius, who had been checking his portfolio on a datapad, let the device slip to his side. The socialite's fan ceased its motion. The music filling the Aurelia ballroom was no longer just skilled. It was alive. It spoke of deep, old things, of a blue-green world not of steel and light, but of soil and sea. It carried the weight of generations, the joy of survival, the quiet tragedy of fleeting beauty. It was humanity's soul, translated into sound. She moved into the second movement, and where the original score called for cold, precise arpeggios, she wove in fragments of something else. A bluesy inflection bent a note. A hint of a folk melody danced around the edges. A powerful, rolling bass line emerged where none was written, echoing with the strength of a people who had looked at the stars and decided to reach them not with cold logic, but with burning hope. It was Earth's entire musical history, distilled and offered as a gift. Tears, unasked for and unbecoming, traced down the cheek of the stern ambassador from a stoic, mineral-based species. The cruise director stood frozen, his professional smile gone, replaced by naked awe. The maestro, pale and leaning against a doorway, watched with his mouth agape. He heard not a student playing his piece, but a master teaching him what it could have been. The final movement was a revelation. The Conrad ended with a complex, crashing crescendo designed to impress with its difficulty. The server honored the fireworks, but infused them with a profound, echoing resolution. The final chords did not just stop. They faded into a silence so deep it felt like a physical presence, ringing in the ears and swelling in the chest. Her hands lifted, settled softly in her lap. She opened her eyes, the distant fire in them cooling. She was just a server again, sitting at a piano in a room full of strangers. For a long moment, there was nothing. No applause. No murmur. The holographic stars twirled silently above. The collective breath of the galaxy's elite was held. Then as one, they rose. It was not a raucous, cheering standing ovation. It was a slow, solemn act of respect. They stood in absolute quiet, their eyes fixed on the small figure in the simple uniform. The Geldar composer was the first to bow, a deep, formal inclination of his torso. Others followed suit. The socialite simply pressed her hands together, her expression one of humbled wonder. The server stood, gave a small, neutral nod to the room, and walked away from the piano. She did not return to her tray. She moved through the silent, parting crowd, past the speechless director and the awestruck maestro, and exited the Aurelia ballroom. The doors sighed shut behind her. In the corridor, the artificial ambience felt thin and cheap. A fellow server rushed up, eyes wide. What was that? They are all just standing in there, saying nothing. The young woman offered a small, tired smile. It was just a song, she said. She walked down the gleaming hall to the service elevator. It descended through the luxurious decks, past the suites and casinos, down into the functional, humming heart of the ship. The doors opened on a stark corridor lined with crew quarters. Inside her small, neat room, opposite her bunk, sat a small, worn keyboard, its surface faded from use. Above it, pinned to the wall, was a simple image of an old, upright piano in a sunlit room on Earth. She changed out of her uniform, hung it up, and sat before the keyboard. She powered it on, its soft glow the only light. For a moment, she listened to the ship's deep, mechanical breath. Then, her fingers touched the keys once more. This time, the music was a private, lullaby-soft melody, a song for no one but herself and the silent, sleeping metal around her. It was a song of home, carried in the bones, played not for crowds or coin, but because the music demanded to be free. In the quiet of the ship's belly, the true performance, the endless one, continued.